Hello guys and welcome back. Today I'll be going over the 10 most toxic hated cards in Hearthstone Battlegrounds history. While some of you might love and miss some of those, a lot of us probably don't. Let's jump right into the list. Starting off at number 10, we have the most frustrating 3-drop ever added to the game, Baron's Blacksmith. It was a 3-drop 3/5 Frenzy, give your other minions +2/+2. The Frenzy procs whenever this takes damage but doesn't die. So basically, once this attacks, if it procs, it's 15-17 worth of stats for a 3-drop, which basically means you're winning the fight and dealing infinite damage to your opponent. And keep in mind, damage cap was not even in the game back then. At the same time though, if this attacks into a taunt with 5 or more attack, it just dies, deals 3 damage, and doesn't do anything else. Which means that you're probably gonna lose the fight, because the rest of your board is probably pretty bad at that point. So basically, this card ended up frustrating people left and right, no matter if you played it or if you played against it. And pretty much everyone hated it. It made so many players quit until it finally got removed from the game. Coming in at number 9, we have Rabid Sorolisk. And most of you probably know this card. It's been in the game for a while, even though it got recently removed. And this is a pretty innocuous card, right? But it didn't used to be so innocent on release. In fact, this used to be a 1-drop 3/1 after you play a minion with the Fraddle, gain +1/+1. So a little bit less of a base stats, a little bit less of a buff, but the fact that it was a 3/1 was a huge deal, because basically this version of Sorolisk created the very first tier 1 competitive strategy in Battlegrounds, when people will basically stay on tier 1, buy Rough Weaver, buy Sorolisk, triple them, buy Death Rattle Demons. Selfless used to be a 1-drop at the time, so you would also get Golden Selfless on tier 1, and tripling into 2-drops, you could triple into Ghoul, basically a smaller version of Tunnel Blaster. It was the initial basic Tunnel Blaster. So you will have the Ghoul to counter any kind of Max or Divine Shield combs, and then you will have Golden Selfless plus a lot of chunky Golden Sorolisk and Weaver. Like very often you will end up having like 3 or 4 version of like Golden Sorolisk, Golden Weavers like mixed up together, and that will be basically your comp, and you will stay on Tavern 1 literally the whole entire game, and that will get you to top 2, sometimes even win lobbies when your opponents were not too strong, or maybe they were playing Max. So yeah, this strategy reigned supreme for several months until Sorolisk was eventually moved to tier 2. Next up at number 8, we have Khadgar. Even though this card was not hated on by the community too much, it kept on breaking the game on several occasions. The first time this card absolutely broke the game was during the introduction of Dark Moon prizes. Basically what happened is that people will just stay on tier 3 and force Khadgars and buy token minions, Alicat and Murloc Tidehunter, and basically just play as many wacky Death Rattle Khadgar boards for tempo as they could while holding tokens in their hand, waiting for turn 8 to get potentially Brand's Blessing as a prize, and then just pop off on turn 8 and get 25 plus triples in one turn off of tokens. Because if you would have multiple Khadgars on your board, the token minion will keep on spawning and generating triples in your hand almost endlessly. It's like you could get like 2 or 3 triples out of a single token, and then you could even roll for more tokens. You could get more Tidehunters through Primal Fiend Lookout, and yeah, people were literally getting 25 plus triples on turn 8, and even over 50 triples by the end of the game, like as soon as turn 9 and 10. Keep in mind, back then, damage cap was not even in the game. So basically you either did the Khadgar thing, or you will face somebody that did it and will have a full board of 6 drops and just kill you from 40 HP pretty much. This interaction lasted for the entirety of the Dark Moon Prize meta, and even after Dark Moon Prizes got removed, people kept forcing this strategy and trying to triple into Bran, to the point that devs actually had to change the interaction between Khadgar and token summoning. Post-nerf, the tokens would only summon up until you had 7 minions on your board, and that will be it. So you will basically be capped at only 1 triple per token, which made the strategy way less viable. Like at most you could get like 4 or 5 triples in a turn, which was still pretty good, but not good enough for everyone to force it all the time anymore. Shortly after, with the introduction of pirates, the player base discovered the Eliza plus Scallywag Exodia combo. We will basically play Scallywag with Eliza that buffs your board, and then you will play like several Khadgars and Baron Rivendare to keep proccing the Scallywag and keep summoning more Scallywags. This comp was pretty fun, although at first the animations were so slow that they literally broke the game. The animation will go on so long that basically players will just keep straight to the next fight. And yeah, that kept being in the game for several weeks until they finally figured out how to fix it. And lastly, during the quest meta, the card ended up breaking the game because of the Evil Twin quest. Basically, the Evil Twin is a quest that at the start of the fight is gonna summon a copy of your biggest minion. And you will just get double Khadgar on your board, or even golden Khadgar, with a big Deflectobot or Makril, and just summon multiple copies of it. And your opponents will basically have no ways to deal with it, because they will keep refreshing each other. And that was a very toxic interaction that got quickly addressed. The Khadgar itself never changed, since it's a constructed card, so they couldn't really rework the effect, but the devs had to keep changing all sorts of interactions around him as long as it was into the game, up until it got removed. So yeah, this card definitely deserves its spots onto the list. At number 7, we have Cookie Chemist. This card came from Constructed, and it's a 2-drop 4/4 Battlecry, swap the attack and health of a minion. So somewhat of an innocent looking card, right? But this card definitely broke Battlegrounds. Starting off with Chroma Wing, that used to be a 1/3 tier 1 dragon. After you upgrade your tavern tier, double this minion's attack. At the time, a pro player named Jif quickly popularized a strategy involving staying on tier 1, picking heroes such as Mukla or Edwin or even Drektar, any hero that could buff attack on the Chroma Wing, and then just farm Chroma Wing triple, level up to tier 4 or 5 with it, and instantly switching attack and health with the Cookie Chemist. Ended up having a minion with 3000 HP as soon as turn 7 or 8, which will basically be unkillable by any of your opponent's minions. The strategy proved to be extremely toxic and led to numerous Chroma Wing reworks. Once the Chroma Wing interaction got addressed, people kept using the card to turn temporary stats granted from stuff like spellcrafts or even some hero powers into permanent stats. But most importantly, this card used to have a really peculiar interaction with gems. Basically what would happen is that, let's say you had 100 gems on an Agem, you will switch attack and health with this card, and then use Necrolite to move the 100 gems onto another minion. Since technically the stats on the Agem were reset by the Cookie Chemist, even though you were swapping 100 gems onto something else, the Agem will still keep all of its stats, effectively turning Necrolite into a 100/100 buff. This was an insanely broken strategy and insanely consistent. People forced Quilboar all the time, and Quillboars dominated the meta until Cookie Chemist eventually got removed. Next up, at number 6, we have Prestor's Pyrospawn. 3/5 dragon. Whenever another friendly dragon attacks, deal 3 damage to its target. So this kinda looks like a whatever effect, right? Well, this card ended up warping the whole metagame around its existence. The reason why, it's because basically this effect allows you to get rid of small poison before attacking into them, and more importantly, it allows you to get rid of Divine Shields as you attack into them. So back then, Leroy was not a card, and the metagame was very much focused around Divine Shield through Max Deflecto comps, Mackerel comps, and just people having a lot of Divine Shield poison minions, and just people having a lot of Divine Shield poison minions with just Amalgam getting module plus Toxfins, and we even had the Amalgadon card, which used to be the old version of Mantid Queen. Although the Amalgadon card was also an Amalgam tribe, so it was a dragon itself. So basically the whole metagame revolved around Prestor's Pyrospawn and Amalgadon, and just mishmashing other dragons in the mix. And at the end of the day, it came down to the mirror most of the times, because this was the best comp in the game. And at that point, whoever rolled Wind Fury on his Amalgadon and got lucky enough to attack first will win the fight. And that was extremely toxic, like top 2 always coming down to these dirty flips. It made the late game very homogeneous and not enjoyable. That's why this toxic card definitely belongs onto the list. Well, now we get into the real spice. At number 5, we have Stormscale Siren. At the end of your turn, you cast your Spellcraft's minion spells on them. So basically what will happen is that once you're done doing all your Spellcraft stuff with Atisha and whatnot, at the end of the turn, this will recast all the Spellcrafts on the minions. And that will proc your Atisha, will proc your Brute, will proc your Wrangler, and on top of that, will grant the minions their Spellcraft's abilities. So it's kind of like a massive Light Fangs, but it's even better, because basically you will run like as many Atishas as possible, plus Orgozoa, Glowscale, and at the end of your turn you will get infinite stats, you will get a bunch of Naga in your hand through Orgozoa, and the Glowscales will Divine Shield themselves. When this card was in, Naga was by far the best tribe, literally winning 90+% of any lobby, and they were basically unstoppable. On top of that, this card got initially introduced as a tier 3 minion with the same exact effect and just 1/1 less in stats. It was absolutely mental, and after like a couple of weeks, they actually just had to remove the card. They said they were gonna bring it back, but guess what? It never made it back into the game. The card was just way too strong for Naga. Although, as time goes on, the power level of the game has kept increasing over time, so who knows, maybe one day this minion will make a comeback into the tavern. Coming in at number 4, we have Gentle Megasaur, the big elephant in the room. This is a card that will surely trigger some PTSD. It's a 5/4 Battlecry Beast. Adapt all your Murlocs. Adapt basically means grant them keywords. Those keywords are Death Rattle, summon 2 1/1s, Divine Shield, Poisonous, Wind Fury, plus health, plus attack, specifically plus 3 health or plus 3 attack, and maybe some other ones that I'm not thinking about right now. Even though this is a beast card, it used to be part of the Murloc pool, so you will only have access to this in Murloc lobbies, and basically you will just be playing your tempo comp, would it be Max, Juggler, whatever, and as soon as you roll into a Bran, you will just level to tier 6, collect some tokens, roll for some Gentle Megasaur, and then eventually just play Bran, play a Khadgar, sell your whole board, play a bunch of tokens, get a bunch of triples, discover a bunch of Megasaurs. At that point, you will have like a bunch of small Murloc tokens on your board that you generated through your Murloc Tidehunter, and you will just play like 2 or 3 Megasaurs with Bran on the board, and they will all get Poisonous, Divine Shield, and Death Rattle summon 2 plants. And that will obviously be the best comp in the game, and yeah, that was the meta. To be fair though, this was very early on into the game, so not too many people did this. Basically only like top 25, maybe top 30 players of each region were consistently playing and pulling off this pivot and this strategy. But yeah, that was pretty much the meta until they got rid of this card, because it was obviously way too strong. Although this being only number 4 might sound surprising for some of you, the reason why it's only a number 4, it's because for top 3 we have the best Battlecry ever, the best utility minion ever, and the best carry minion ever. And there's actually a Battlecry that was even stronger than this, believe it or not. So diving into top 3, we have Elystra the Immortal. Tier 6, 4/4, Divine Shield Reborn. Whenever a friendly taunt minion is attacked, this gets attacked instead. So basically, this will be Mega Taunt. As long as you have any other taunt on your board, whenever your opponent tries to attack into it, instead they attack into a 4/4 Divine Shield Reborn minion. So basically, the idea behind this card was to incentivize people to play taunt comps with multiple taunt units. Because back in the days, and honestly throughout the majority of Hearthstone's history, people have just been playing as few taunts as possible just to make sure that they play around the possibility of your opponent having a cleave. So if you run multiple taunts in your composition, then it sort of defeats the whole point of having the taunt. So they added this card so that people will play multiple taunts and still play around cleaves. I believe that was their idea. Guess what happened? Anyone ran this card in any comp, because if you play around it and they don't have it, you lose the game. And if you don't play around it and they have it, you also lose the game. So think about it this way. Let's assume that your opponent doesn't have Elystra, right? Then you play your normal positioning. You have, let's say, a Bumper in position 1, and then like a Divine Shield in position 2, and then maybe a Cleave in position 3, and then whatever comes after that. So if they don't have Elystra, you kill your opponent's taunt, and then your Cleave goes off, and you're happy, right? Everything worked out. But if they do have Elystra, then you lose your Bumper, you lose your Divine Shield, you lose your Hydra attack, and so on and so forth. Everything goes into the Elystra. At the same time though, let's say you want to play around Elystra, you just put a bunch of big minions up front so that they can value trade into the 4/4 Divine Shield body. And then they don't have it. Instead, they have a Poisonous Divine Shield taunt. All your minions dies into the taunt, and then you lost the fight. This card was so insanely annoying while it was into the game. And to make things even worse, when this initially came out, it was a 7/7 instead of a 4/4. So on top of being an obnoxious late game tech, it was also insanely strong to just triple into it early on. It was so much damage, right? It was 28 damage. So yeah, this card is by far my most hated card of all times, and I hope it never comes back. Also, for all of you who weren't playing the game while this was in, you didn't miss on anything. Bless you. Next up, for the top 2, we have Friend of a Friend. This is the first iteration of Friend of a Friend, and believe it or not, this card lasts into the game for just 6 days. I'm pretty sure this is the shortest amount of time a card has ever been in the game, and that's because this thing completely broke everything. Basically, what will happen is that as soon as you got one Bran and one Friend of a Friend, you were infinite. Because Friend of a Friend will discover bodies which will give you more gold. It could discover the Toki body, which will discover minions from a higher tier, so you will discover more Friend of a Friends, which will give you more body, so on and so forth. Infinite gold. Not to mention that on top of having infinite gold, you will also generate infinite stats, because back then we had multiple Battlecry bodies that will just buff ridiculous amount of stats on your minions, so you could build big cliffs out of nowhere. And obviously you could discover Dark Moon prizes through certain bodies, so you could even get Ice Block, you could make minions in your shop cheaper, you could get free rolls, all kind of madness happening left and right. This interaction was so insanely broken that when they removed it, the devs even made a post about it. Here's the post. You guys can read it. I'm not gonna go through it all, but TLDR, basically, the APM required to play Friend of a Friend was deemed too insane and game warping even by the devs. They said that they wanted this effect in the game, but Friend of a Friend was too much. For them, Hogar Infinite Gold was fine, Friend of a Friend was not fine. Probably mainly because it was somewhat of a random effect. And on top of that, this minion got introduced while the first ever lobby legend was about to take place. So the community was very vocal about the fact that having such a random effect being the most powerful card to showcase in your first official competitive tournament would have not been a very great look for the game. Last but not least, at number 1 spot, we have the best carry unit ever released into the game to this date. Yes, this was even better than a Divine Shield Blanchi. I'm talking about none other than Holy Mackerel. Not Mackerel, the little brother, Mackerel, the OG one. This used to be a tier 6, 8-4 Murloc. After another friendly minion loses Divine Shield, gain Divine Shield, which is the same exact text as Mackerel. The catch here is that this used to be a Murloc. So basically what would happen is that you could just give this Poisonous with a Toxfin, or if you wanted to go over the top, you could even give it Taunt Divine Shield or just Divine Shield with a Megasaur and have 2 of these on your board, and they will keep ping-ponging forever and just kill your opponent's entire board. Back in the day, Leroy was not a thing, and other than Juggler, we didn't have many AoE or random damage effects. Also, to deal with Divine Shield, we just had the Ghoul card, not the Blaster, which deals more damage. At the same time, the Ghoul used to behave in a different way. So basically, if you would have a full board of Divine Shield, regardless of where they were placed, once the Ghoul will go off, both your Mackerel will still end up having Divine Shield. So this card back then was literally uncounterable, other than by some Beast Mama Bear shenanigans. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that this is a Murloc. The bare minimum is that you can give it Poison Divine Shield. But obviously, it being a Murloc, you could just scale it up to infinite stats with just a Bran. Like, it was really easy to have a 60-60 Holy Mackerel with Poison. On top of that, back then, discover effects were not limited to your Tavern tier. You could just discover this on tier 4 with a Primal Fin and start building on it. Card was absolutely insane, and for that reason it takes the #1 spot. If you watched this video up until the end, thank you so much. Consider subscribing and check out my Twitch channel, link in the description. Did I miss something? Let me know down below, and see you in the next one.